I'm recording on an Eken H8 Pro camera, and I'm also have here in my hand an Andoer. I don't know the exact model, but it's a 4K Ultra HD 30 frames per second. These are both native. Actually, I'm going to turn this one on. And we're recording on the Andoer now. So, meet your competition. Eken, meet Andoer. There we go. Okay, so here's the deal. These are both native 4K 30 frames per second action cameras. They're both built with the Ambarella A12 chipset, which gives you that high performance capability. Now the problem is that this chipset, this powerful chipset on both cameras, which are the same chipset, and by the way, both cameras take absolutely gorgeous video, gets really hot. So as a result, the Eken has been crashing on me. I haven't done a lot of work with the Andoer. Initially, when I got both cameras, I put a freshly charged battery in and ran them to measure battery life, and they all completed without crashing. And the more I used the Eken, the more frequently the crashing occurred. I believe it's due to heat. Now, I have to tell you that I took the Eken out in the world, out in full sunlight, out on a warm, hot day. So the external ambient temperature, the problems that I was having with the Eken, could be due to external heat. But in either case, both cameras get quite warm when you're recording at 4K 30. So what I want to do is get inside and see if there's any way to get the heat out. By the way, the Eken started having problems with when it was inside the waterproof case. I haven't put the Andoer in the waterproof case yet, but it does get quite warm. And when both cameras were new, they would record for 40 plus minutes on a full charge, running at maximum resolution in 4K 30. So I've got a third victim here. This is an Akaso, a cheap Akaso Taiwanese knockoff camera, and I didn't want to dissect my 4K cameras. I was trying to see if a lower camera could meet my needs, and it doesn't. So that's why I decided to tear this one apart. So this camera right here, the Akaso EK7000, appears to be a very generic clone camera, and I took it out of its case very carefully. And what I intend to do here is first, take a look at it. You can see the chipset right here, which I assume generates a lot of heat. There's this thing on the side it looks like a heat sink that's soldered into the PC board, so it's providing some cooling into the PC board, I believe. I don't think it's an antenna, but it's encased in the plastic housing, so how's the heat supposed to get out? The third thing is, when you insert a battery into the case here, you slide it in from the bottom and you engage these contacts right here, there. So now the battery is engaged. The battery itself, the LiPo battery or the lithium-ion battery, actually gets warm when you use it. So the battery itself is getting hot. It's sitting right on top of the processor is getting hot, and it's all in this nice plastic case that keeps the heat in. And then on top of that, if you're inside a waterproof case, that's another insulating blanket you throw over this whole thing. So I'm going to turn this bad boy on. Hopefully it'll power up. There we go. All right. So I turned the Andoer, the Akaso EK7000, the one that's disassembled. I've turned it on to the maximum resolution, maximum frame rate. I'm just going to let it run, and from there I'm going to try and find some means of sensing what parts on this thing get hot. Just sitting out here in the open air, I'm just going to let it run until I'm envisioning how am I going to get a heat spreader onto that chip and out. Seems like it's pretty doable. Cut a hole in the case. Now, at first I'd have to take apart the other cameras and see exactly where the chip is, but here's the housing for the battery. Cut a hole in the housing. put a heat sink on it, a heat spreader, heat conductor, maybe copper, aluminum, run it out the bottom of the camera, and then from there get that heat out somewhere else. The other thing I plan to do is use an external battery. So if in fact the battery itself is getting warm due to the high discharge rate, that won't be a problem in the future. I've already taken an older battery from a different camera, and this battery actually, I used it so much that it started bulging, which I thought was a tiny bit risky. So I took this out, and I noticed inside that there is some circuitry here, which is probably some protection circuitry to prevent the battery from exploding. But I'm going to wire this up to provide external power to the camera through this connector right there. So just going to let this run. Okay, so we've been recording for a while, and the blinky light is still blinking. So let's see, temperature wise. Ooh, that battery's pretty warm. Pretty warm. I can't really tell if that heatsink is warm or not. I'm going to flip this up on its side. Yeah, I can feel some heat coming off the heatsink, although the metal is so thin, I think just by touching it, I'm depleting its temperature. PC board feels pretty warm. Yep, top of that chip is pretty warm. And let me just touch the board. Ow! Those gold things right there, those are called thermal vias. They help conduct heat away from the chip and out into the PC board. And they are hot. Hot enough I cannot leave my thumb on there. So, one last thing I'm going to do here, put this down. I'm going to pull the battery. Actually, I'll stop recording so that we save the video. Okay, recording stopped. Power off. There, pull the battery. Okay, finger on top of the chip. It's pretty hot. Almost too hot to touch. But I can keep my finger on there, on the top. The memory chip next to it, the memory chip next to it is actually hotter than the top of this thing. Now the top of this chip looks like it's got a heat spreader bonded to it. But this little camera running, that was recording at 4K 25 frames per second, got generating a lot of heat. So we got the same constraints on the Eken camera. I'm assuming we're going to have the same problems here. And I went on the internet and the message boards, and they say, oh my God, you're using a card that's too slow for these high performance cameras. Well, I call bullshit on that. I bought U1 cards for both cameras. The U1s I measured have a write performance of well over 15 megabytes per second. I went out and actually started having the problem. I went out and I bought a U3 card, which records at over 60 megabytes per second, and the problem still persists. So I don't think it's the card. I don't think it's the record rate of the card. The standard card I've been using is the Samsung Evo 64. This is a U1. That's what I'm recording on right now. I do have here the U3 card is a Sandisk Extreme 64 gigabyte card. But regardless, don't think it's the recording rate, the write rate of the card. When you're recording at 4K and compressing it, the bit stream is coming in at about under 7 megabytes per second. So as long as your card can sustain 7 megabytes per second, and these U1 cards are more than double that, the recording is not the issue, especially if the camera crashes after 2 minutes of recording. If someone wants to dispute me on this with any technical explanation, I'd be happy to hear it. But just keep in mind that the action camera guys who promote the fastest speed of cards for their action cameras are doing the card makers a big favor, because you're going to spend a lot more money on a U3 card than on a U1 card. So of course the card makers want you to believe that you need a U3 card, when in fact you probably, I'm 99% sure you don't. U1 is good enough. Anyway, so both these cameras get really hot.